Hi everyone, this is Cecil again, and this is another of our Know Yellowstone Before You Go podcasts. This is part 2, and in this part 2, I'll be taking you through Yellowstone's roads, where they lead to, what the Grand Loop Road is all about, and what you can expect to see, do, and experience as you make your way around Yellowstone. As many of you know by now, the roads through Yellowstone make up a massive figure of 8, and tour companies like ours will generally divide their tours into one day on the upper loop of the figure of 8, another day on the lower loop of the figure of 8, and then in addition you've got the various roads leading to the various entrances. Guys, it would be helpful if you looked at a map while you're listening to this podcast. A couple of ways you can do it. You can go to our motel website, which is ysmotel.com/map. That's YS, so an abbreviation for Yellowstone, ysmotel.com/map. You'll find the map there. I'll also be working with a map of Yellowstone that you can find on Google Maps. Alternatively, if you go to YouTube, put in Yellowstone Tours without a space between Yellowstone and Tours, just Yellowstone Tours, it'll ask you, did you mean Yellowstone and then space tours? No, you don't. You want Yellowstone Tours, one word. Click on that and it'll bring you to Yellowstone Tours, which is our channel, and you'll see we have tons and tons of different videos and podcasts which will tell you all about Yellowstone. I am going to start with the map that you can see at ysmotel.com/map. And in dealing with the roads through Yellowstone, I will begin at the west entrance. The reason I'm beginning at the west entrance is that the west entrance is not only Yellowstone's busiest entrance, but it's also where our tour company is based. And you can see our tours at yellowstonetours.net, and as well where our motel is, which you can see again at ysmotel.com. With West Yellowstone being Yellowstone's busiest entrance, this is where most people will enter the park. So if we look at the map, West Yellowstone you'll find on the left-hand side or the west side, about perhaps 60% of the way down. And guys, please bear in mind, on this podcast, I'm not going to have time to go into a lot of detail about what you can see and do. Remember that we have a lot of other podcasts and virtual Yellowstone tours on all the roads through Yellowstone. We cover every single road. If you go to YouTube, for example, and put in just one road, Fishing Bridge to the east entrance, which is what I'm showing on the podcast at the moment, it'll bring up the section of road. What you're looking at is, when I was filming this section of road, I happened to come across all these people, and in this section of the park, all these people could only mean one thing, and that's a bear jam. And is there anything we like in Yellowstone more than a bear jam? Well, I suppose so. We like wolf jams as well, although those are not anywhere near as frequent. So you could also, for example, put in Old Faithful to West Thumb or Madison Junction to West Yellowstone, and you could see a podcast or a virtual Yellowstone tour of that section of road as well. So to get back to the map at ysmotel.com/map, we're going to start at the west entrance. As you come into the park, you'll notice that there's the lodgepole pine trees all around you. You'll come to the first manifestations of the Great Fire of 1988, because you'll see all the snags or standing dead trees. You'll pass a pretty cool little trail that'll take you down to the Madison River, as well as walk you in and out of the snags and the new growth lodgepole pine trees. You'll then pick up the Madison River. The Madison River, when it is on the south side of the road between West Yellowstone and Madison Junction, that's where the Madison Valley is. And the Madison Valley is one of the most fertile places in Yellowstone. There's an elk herd that you'll often see there, and there's often also bison in this region as well. So keep your eyes open for all the wildlife. When we get to Madison Junction, we're going to come to what's known as the Grand Loop Road. And if you're looking at the map on which I am, you'll see that there is a road that runs all the way around Yellowstone National Park. And as I mentioned before, it makes up a massive figure of 8. So you've got the lower loop, obviously, at the bottom, and the upper loop at the top. Now, what I'd like you to look at is pretty interesting. If we look at the lower loop of Yellowstone, do you guys see this soft purple line that runs around, more or less following the Grand Loop Road on the lower loop? What that is that shows us the approximate Caldera boundary. And Caldera is just a fancy name for a massive hole in the ground that was left after a volcanic eruption, in this case the Yellowstone supervolcano, which last erupted, depending on who you want to believe, in between about 610,000 years ago and 630,000 years ago. Now, I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail other than to say, look at where the Caldera line is, and that is where you're going to find most of Yellowstone's thermal features. Most of the geysers, the hot springs, the mud pots, and the fumaroles. So we'll come to Madison Junction, and I'm going to zoom in again on the map. And as we come in, you'll notice there's a road just to the west of the Grand Loop Road, and that is Firehole Canyon Drive. You're not going to see any main thermal features there, but it's a pretty little drive. Amongst other things, there is a swimming hole there, and there's also Firehole Falls, which is a pretty neat waterfall. We'll then join the Grand Loop Road and continue in a more or less southerly direction. And the part of Yellowstone that I'm showing you now, more or less the southwest corner of Yellowstone's lower loop, this is where Yellowstone's main geyser basins are to be found. You have the lower geyser basin, the Midway geyser basin, and the upper geyser basin. Those are the 3 main geyser basins. It stands to reason you're going to want to spend a lot of time in this area. Before we get there, though, we'll notice Fountain Flat Drive. There are a couple of cool thermal features in that area over there. I'm going to switch to Google Maps to the satellite view, and let me zoom in a little and you'll see why. Where we see these white areas that you can see, these sort of paler areas, that is where we can expect to find thermal features, because that is sinter. Sinter is a mineral that has been brought up from underground by the hot springs and the eruptions of the geysers in Yellowstone. So just to orientate you, I'm now zooming in on where I was previously, where Fountain Flat Drive is, and we can notice all this white area. So we're coming into thermal areas. Fountain Flat Drive will take you on a trail all the way down to the Fairy Falls Trailhead parking lot, and this is one of the few trails in Yellowstone where you're allowed to take a bicycle. At the end of this little parking lot that we see over there, you can also take a stroll there. You're next to the Firehole River at times, and there are some thermal features, some smaller ones on secondary trails that run off Fountain Flat Drive. We're going to continue in a southerly direction, Mary Mountain West. That's a trailhead to a longer trail that cuts all the way up to the northern portion of the Hayden Valley. I'll try and remember to tell you about that. And we're going to continue dropping down. Now, as we come down, we're going to see the Nez Perce Creek. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Oh, that was zooming out too much. Okay, so I've gone back a little bit. There's the Nez Perce Creek before Mary Mountain. As you come around this corner here, you're going to climb up a little hill, and then you have the most wonderful view of the main thermal features for the first time. You're going to see all sorts of steam coming off the lower geyser basin. So you'll want to stop and take pictures of that. Zooming in again now, we're going to get to the lower geyser basin. And as I mentioned to you before, there are three main geyser basins in this part of Yellowstone. This is the first one you're going to come to. There's a delightful boardwalk system that runs all the way around the lower geyser basin. Once again, please check out our other podcasts or virtual Yellowstone videos for more information on that. We're going to carry on dropping down, and we'll come to Firehole Lake Drive. Firehole Lake Drive is, in my opinion, one of Yellowstone's best kept secrets because it's off the Grand Loop Road. You don't have that many people taking it, but it's home to both Great Fountain Geyser as well as White Dome Geyser, and I go into a lot more detail in the difference between cone geysers and fountain geysers in others of our virtual Yellowstone tours and podcasts. We'll then come to the Midway Geyser Basin, and you can already see just how many thermal features there are in this part of Yellowstone. Midway Geyser Basin is home to one of Yellowstone's most iconic sites, Grand Prismatic Spring. Just look how amazingly colorful that is. You'll want to stop there, walk the boardwalk system around Excelsior Geyser Crater, which used to be a functioning geyser but is now extinct or defunct. Leaving the Midway Geyser Basin, the next major point I'd like to draw to your attention is the Fairy Falls Trail parking lot. This is where the Fountain Flat Trail will come out. The Fairy Falls Trail parking lot, the Fairy Falls Trail will not only take you to Fairy Falls, but it also takes you to this really cool overlook of Grand Prismatic Spring. You might like to check out the hike that we have there to the Grand Prismatic Spring Overlook. You can find it in our YouTube channel. So you can take that to both the Grand Prismatic Spring Overlook. You can continue on to Fairy Falls, and then we have another hike which goes on to Imperial Geyser. And Imperial Geyser is just stunning, as I tell you more about in various of our other Yellowstone podcasts and virtual Yellowstone tours. I mentioned to you that there are three main geyser basins. There are two other important geyser basins in this part of Yellowstone as well. The first one that you'll come to, traveling the way that we are, is Biscuit Basin. You'll notice it says Biscuit Basin Trailhead. You can take the trail to the boardwalks around Biscuit Basin. You'll also notice that you can continue to the back of Biscuit Basin, take the Continental Divide Trail. That will take you to something called Mystic Falls, which is a really pleasant hike. It's flat as far as Mystic Falls. You can see all the hikes that our company offers. We offer guided hikes at YellowstoneDayHikes.com. That's YellowstoneDayHikes.com. So you can go to Mystic Falls, or you can also continue from Mystic Falls onto the Biscuit Basin Overlook Trail. Now that is steep. Just make sure that you are comfortable doing that. You'll notice the Continental Divide also comes out a little to the south, so you can access the Mystic Falls Trailhead either through Biscuit Basin or on the trail I'm showing you now, which is a portion of the Continental Divide Trail. On the other side of the road, you'll see the Continental Divide Trail continues. There's a parking lot here. And although there's no sign on the other side of the road telling you that this is the Mystic Falls Trailhead, if you see the Daisy Geyser sign, you'll know that you're across the road from the Mystic Falls Trailhead. This trail will take you to the Daisy group of geysers, which are in the upper geyser basin. We also offer this hike on our site, YellowstoneDayHikes.com. I'll get back to more details about the Upper Geyser Basin shortly. We'll continue south on our way towards the Upper Geyser Basin and Old Faithful, and we're going to come to Black Sand Basin, which is another really cool geyser basin in this part of Yellowstone, and for my money, it is a must visit. Where you see this interchange, that is the road that's going to take you to Old Faithful. Here's a local tip for you. When you get off, as you're driving in, you'll see the signs that tell you get to the back to the Old Faithful parking. What they don't tell you is if you take this first road to the left or to the east, That'll take you to the parking lot in front of Old Faithful Inn, and you have much better access to Old Faithful. You have much better access to the various boardwalks that go through the Upper Geyser Basin. So consider parking there as well. So many people, when they come to Yellowstone, just do Old Faithful, but as you can see, there's just so much more to see and do in this part of Yellowstone, and please check it out in various of our other podcasts or virtual Yellowstone tours. I'm going to continue now, and you'll see we're coming to Kepler Cascades, which is a cool little waterfall. We then come across the Lone Star Geyser Trailhead, just a delightful hike. Another of the few places you can take a bicycle along the trail in Yellowstone. We're going to continue now, and I'm going to go back to the other map, which we have at our motel site, ysmotel.com/map. And we climb up now to the Continental Divide. This is one of 2 times that we're going to be crossing the Continental Divide in this part of Yellowstone. And the first time we're going to come across Isa Lake. Such a pretty little lake, a tiny lake with beautiful water lilies in it. I won't go into detail here, but it's got great geological significance as well. We'll pass an overlook to Shoshone Lake, the second biggest lake in Yellowstone, and what is believed to be the largest lake in the lower 48 states that you cannot access by road. You have to hike in, or if you want to get to the far end of Shoshone Lake, you can put in a kayak in Lewis Lake, take the Lewis River up, and then come to Shoshone Lake, but that's another story. We'll cross over the Continental Divide, drop down the other side, and I'm going back to Google Maps now, and that's when we come to West Thumb Geyser Basin. And I know for those of you who have watched many of these virtual Yellowstone tours or Yellowstone podcasts, that I can be a bit like a stuck record here, but this is my favorite geyser basin in all of Yellowstone. It's just stunning. And as you drive down, you'll see beautiful views over this little duck lake to Yellowstone Lake, which is the largest lake in Yellowstone, as well as being the second largest alpine lake in the world. Let's get off the Grand Loop Road for a moment, as now, instead of continuing along the Grand Loop Road along the shores of Yellowstone Lake, we're going to head to the south, and we're going to take a road that runs to Yellowstone's south entrance. Even though we're inside the line of the caldera, as you can see on this map at ysmotel.com/map, don't expect to see that many thermal features. You'll drive past Lewis Lake, which is particularly beautiful in the early spring when it still has ice on it. You'll then come to Lewis Falls, a very popular waterfall in Yellowstone because it's right next to the road. There's also a little trail that you can take to an overlook of the falls, and check that out in our YouTube channel as well. You'll then follow Lewis Canyon, and that has some wonderful viewpoints, and I'm just switching back to Google Maps to see if I can show you where you should pull out. As we follow the road down, you'll find that there are pullouts, and one of these pullouts, and I'm not sure if you can see it on Google Maps, maybe this one over here, it's the only one that has those signs that the National Park Service is so good at erecting. It tells you about how the Great Fire of 1988 was able to jump the river. Anyway, you've got great views of the canyon, and you should get some wonderful pictures there. Let's continue heading south on our way towards the south entrance. The scenery is really spectacular. As I said, you're not going to find much in the way of thermal features. As you get down towards the south entrance, you will come across a little parking lot where you can park and take a very short stroll to Moose Creek. I believe the name of the creek that you go over is Crawfish Creek, if my memory serves me correctly. And then you can see Moose Falls. It really isn't more than a 5-minute walk, but it's well worth it. Also at the south entrance, you can see where it says Snake River. That is the Snake River picnic area. It's one of my favorite picnic areas in all of Yellowstone. You've got these beautiful forests, you've got the water in the Snake River, and it's absolutely stunning. We'll then come to Yellowstone's south entrance, and from the south entrance we'd make our way over the Roosevelt Parkway into Grand Teton National Park. Let's now head back up to West Thumb, where we can join the Grand Loop Road again. And once you've had the opportunity to explore West Thumb, which I mentioned to you as a must. Oh, I forgot to say that one of the areas where you can stay and camp in Yellowstone, there's both inside lodging as well as a campground, is Grant Village, which is just to the south of West Thumb. And there's some wonderful views over the lake, and there's actually a restaurant that's right on the lake that is well worth a visit if you do have the opportunity to be in that area. We'll continue on our way along the Grand Loop Road. It's not unusual to find thermal features in these white areas, as I mentioned before, and sometimes you'll see a geyser just spouting off in the middle of nowhere. This next section of road has beautiful views over Yellowstone Lake towards the Absaroka Mountains, which are snow-capped for a lot of the year. There are some great picnic areas along this stretch of road. One of my favorites is where you see the sandbar on the map. If we pull out, we can see there's one of those little primitive restrooms there, and so often when you see those, that means that there's a picnic area there, which there is here, with tables in these trees right on the shores of Yellowstone Lake, and you're going to find others of those as you make your way around Yellowstone Lake. There's a few other little diversions that you can take, but the next main point will be the Gull Point Drive. There's another picnic area right at the right sort of in the middle of Gull Point Drive. In the probably summer to late summer, once the water level starts dropping because there's not as much snowmelt there anymore, you'll find that there's a sandbank that you can take out into the lake. Please be careful though, because it can get rough in no time. There can be waves, and you could get yourself into trouble. We'll come across the Natural Bridge Trailhead, fairly flat walk until you get to Natural Bridge itself, and then if you want to climb up, it's steep but not for very long. There's a marina at Bridge Bay where you can rent a boat for a very different perspective on Yellowstone Lake. We'll go past the Bridge Bay campgrounds, and then we'll continue until we get to Lake Yellowstone Hotel. You've got the hotel there and you've got the lodge there, so there's a lot of lodging. I didn't mention Old Faithful Inn when I was talking about the Upper Geyser Basin, but it's really, for my money, the most stunning building in the entire national park system. Lake Yellowstone isn't in the same league, that's the Lake Yellowstone Hotel, but it's still a very beautiful building. Continuing then, we'll come to Fishing Bridge, which has a lot of historic significance, and it's also where we would turn right to get to the east entrance, and that's the road I'm going to look at now. The east entrance will take us eventually to the town of Cody. The east entrance is a beautiful road. It follows the lake. There are a few thermal features along this road, particularly on the shores of the lake. Just where you come to the edge of the Caldera, there's a pretty little side road that you can take, the Lake Butte Overlook, which will give you a nice overview of Yellowstone Lake. One thing about the road to both the east entrance and the northeast entrance, the closer you get to the entrances, the more stunning the scenery becomes. And for that reason alone, it's well worth taking this drive. Please bear in mind, though, that Cody is in between 52 and 53 miles from the east entrance. So it is a bit of a drive. And what you may like to do is check the roads before you get to Yellowstone. What I suggest you do is just Google Yellowstone roads. The first link that comes up is the Park Service site, and this will show you a map in basically real time of which roads are open. I'm recording this 4 days before Yellowstone opens for the spring season, so a lot of the roads are still shown as being closed. But if we scroll down, there's also a text version of which roads are open. You can also call this number provided or sign up for text, which is what our tour company does. You may recall you can find our tour company at yellowstonetours.net. That's yellowstonetours.net. We offer more tours of Yellowstone literally than anybody else in the world, from all major western cities as well as local cities such as West Yellowstone and Jackson. So what you want to be careful about at the east entrance, and I'm back at our motel site, ysmotel.com/map, if you're trying to follow along on your own map, you will find that this road over here up what's called the Sylvan Pass is really, really steep. It's significantly steep. The Park Service in recent years has been very proactive about closing the roads down before a storm, particularly a snowstorm, moves in. So you don't want to drive all the way from Cody to get to the east entrance to find that it's closed. Similarly, if we look at the lower loop between West Thumb and Old Faithful, we'll see there's something called Caldera Pass. That road can also be closed down. It's also one of the later roads to open in the summer season because it's high and because of the amount of snow that we get here. So please be careful about that. Along this stretch of road, you've got Sylvan Lake, which is just the most stunning lake with the mountains in the background. You've got Eleanor Lake as well, pretty but not quite as pretty, but you will find picnic tables at both of them. Also, just outside the park, you'll find some wonderful picnic areas, and this is great grizzly bear country. If you've watched any of our virtual Yellowstone tours, you may have seen one where I continue past the east entrance to a little spot I like, where you can sit next to the river and munch on your sandwich or whatever, and enjoy the spectacular views and hopefully see a grizzly. Just remember to carry bear spray with you when you're off the beaten track. You never know when you may need it. Back to the Grand Loop Road on ysmotel.com/map. We're going to continue north now, more or less north, along the Grand Loop Road, and we're going to come to the second of the two main thermal areas on the east side of Yellowstone. This is where we'll find Mud Volcano and Sulphur Cauldron. To me, they're not the grandest thermal areas, but it's still worth taking a look at them. And you'll find that at particularly Mud Volcano, there will be two loops that you can take. Our tours will generally do the lower of the two loops, the one that is closer to the road, and I'm zooming out a bit so you can see what I mean. There is a loop that you can take which is relatively short, and I'm tracing it out for you now, and that'll show you Mud Volcano as well as Dragon's Mouth, which is probably the most fun of the thermal features. But there's also a longer one that you can take where you climb up a hill. I've always felt you can take this one or leave it, but if you have enough time, please consider doing it. Nothing in Yellowstone is a waste of time. And then a little bit further up the road, we come to Sulphur Cauldron. To me, the nicest thing about Sulphur Cauldron is the views you have across the river in the mornings with the sun illuminating some of these thermal features that we see there. Let's continue now up the road a little, and we're going to come to the Hayden Valley. The Hayden Valley is one of Yellowstone's two main wildlife viewing areas. There's such a vast array of wildlife that you can potentially see here. Grizzly bears, black bears, wolves, elk, beaver, otter, you name it. So it's well worth a visit. It's 7 miles east to west by 7 miles south to north. The area to the east of the road where the Yellowstone River is so much more easily viewable and accessible. So that's likely where you'll spend most of your time. Where I'm showing you this body of water now, it's not unusual to find pelicans. Yes, we do get pelicans in Yellowstone, trumpeter swans, as well as other bird life. Where you see this picnic area that I'm pointing out, you may recall I mentioned the Mary Mountain Trail all the way back when we were doing Yellowstone's lower loop. Well, the Mary Mountain Trail, which starts, where are we? Starts somewhere over here, comes out all the way across the Grand Loop Road somewhere over there. So it's a fairly long trail. We then come to one of Yellowstone's hidden wonders, and that is Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And if you have a look at the map that I'm showing you, you'll see that the Park Service, because this is a Park Service map, has been kind enough to put in a close-up of various of the main areas in Yellowstone. I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail because I do that in various of our other virtual Yellowstone tours. Just be aware though that you can take the South Rim Drive to Artist Point, which for my money is the most stunning overlook of Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. You've got the brink of the Upper Falls, you've got the North Rim Drive with the brink of the Lower Falls, as well as various other spectacular viewpoints, and the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone is an absolute must visit. Looking at the map again, we now come to the road that splits up the figure of 8 into 2 loops. And I never like to say that any road through Yellowstone is boring, but you're not going to see quite as much on this road as you would on other roads. The main point of interest before you get to Norris Geyser Basin is Virginia Cascade, which is a really sweet little cascade right next to this road. It's one way heading from west to east, and you can see it reasonably easily from that little road. We're going to continue north now into some of the best grizzly bear terrain in all of Yellowstone. We're going to climb up something called Dunraven Pass towards Mount Washburn. And as we climb up, I'm going to head back towards Google Maps. Hopefully it is in a little more detail over there. So we're leaving Canyon Village and we're going to head up, and this road that leads us up, keep your eyes open, guys, for grizzly bears, for bears. I tend to see more black bears along this section of road than grizzly bears. People ask, well, where do we find bears in Yellowstone? And I joke, look for the crowds. That's where you'll see the bears. But seriously though, somebody has to be the first one to see the bears. So if you're not driving, keep your eyes outside. There's just so much to see and do. Look deep into the forest. You never know when you may see a bear or something else for that matter. I've zoomed in a little bit on Google Maps and I'm showing you what they call the Washburn Hot Springs overlook. We'll see the white area over here once again. You'll see some steam coming off, particularly in the mornings when it's cooler and the sun is backlighting the thermal features. But you'll also find one of those signs there where the Park Service tells you that you have a view here of the eastern edge of the caldera. I've tried to see it, I don't know how many times. You need to have a very vivid imagination, but if the Park Service says it's there, it must be there. Let's continue up this road. As we get to the top of what's called Dunraven Pass, you'll see a trail that you can take, which is the Mount Washburn Trail. Takes you, no surprise, to the top of Mount Washburn. Pretty cool trail. You can see that it switchbacks. It is steep. You are off the beaten track again, so please make sure that you take your bear spray with you. Let's continue then. The road twists and turns and will eventually start dropping down. And as it twists and turns, it's not easy to see, but there are forests to your right. And we have seen bears there as well. Just take it slowly. Don't create a traffic hazard, of course. But take it slowly. and you never know what you may see. Now, you can see this secondary road that meets up with the Grand Loop Road. That is the so-called Chittenden Road, and the Chittenden Road also will take you up to the top of Mount Washburn. I prefer to access Mount Washburn from this access because there is a much greater chance of seeing bighorn sheep in this part of the road. So please take that into consideration. You'll find that the road drops down and then this expansive valley opens up to your right. And you see all these trees here. These are white bark pine trees. And because these are white bark pine trees, this is historically one of the best places in all of Yellowstone to see grizzly bears, or it has been. The problem is that the white bark pine, for reasons I'm not going to go into now, are not producing the berries that the grizzly bears love so much. So you don't see them, the grizzlies there, quite as often as you used to, but there's still a chance of seeing them. Zooming out on the map again, the road continues twisting and turning until it gets closer to the Yellowstone River again, and we come to the Tower Falls area. Notice the white there indicating a thermal area that either was or is there. Not a huge amount in the way of thermal activity there, but this is where we come to Tower Falls, which is a really cool waterfall that's right next to the road. You'll see there's a general store there. You can park in the parking lot, get some refreshments, take a walk to Tower Fall, as well as an overlook of the Yellowstone River. As you leave, keep your eyes open for the so-called Overhanging Cliff. This is a manifestation of the superheating followed by the rapid cooling when an ice age occurred, and you'll find all these funky rock shapes above the road. So look above you. You'll see a few pullouts where you can stop and get some great pictures of the Yellowstone River and the canyon. Continuing north, we'll get to the Calcite Springs Overlook. This is one of my favorite parts of Yellowstone. You'll see Calcite Springs over here, but this will take you to a precipitous overlook of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And one of the reasons that I really like this viewpoint is these cliffs on both sides are steep. There are bighorn sheep in this area over here, and when the females give birth in the spring, they'll often go down those cliffs, and you wouldn't believe how steep they are and what it takes for them to get down there. But it's much safer for them to give birth there. And I've got some really cool pictures of these tiny, tiny bighorn sheep and their moms, and how they balance there and how they make their way back up. I'll never know. Now, listen carefully here, you guys. This area just to the north of Calcite Springs, as far as just to the south of Tower Junction, our tour company calls that Bear Alley. And once again, you can find our tours at YellowstoneTours.net. That's YellowstoneTours.net. There's such a great possibility of seeing bears in this stretch of road. Unfortunately, the Park Service obviously knows about it as well, and this is an area that will get closed off. The road won't get closed off just for bear management, but there will be barricades and signs and rangers and Park Service employees basically telling you not to stop. So we will generally drive this section 2 or 3 times on our tours to see if we can see a bear. We'll then come to Tower Junction. This is where Roosevelt Lodges. You've got cabins there that you can stay at. You can also take hay rides off into this area over there, as well as some horseback rides. It's also where the road is to the northeast entrance. You'll cross the Yellowstone River. There's a picnic area just on the other side of the Yellowstone River. And as we continue driving, we're going to pick up something called the Lamar River and then the Lamar Valley. And I'm going to just zoom out a bit again on our map back at ysmotel.com/map. This area here where the Lamar River is just to the south of the road that leads to the northeast entrance, that is the start of something called the Lamar Valley. I mentioned that the Hayden Valley is a stunning area to watch wildlife. Well, let me tell you what, the Lamar Valley is even better. It's also probably the best place in the entire world to watch wolves. I'm recording this podcast in the spring. You wouldn't believe the pictures that people are publishing now on Facebook and other social media, because as the snows melt, as the lakes thaw, so the carcasses of animals that died in the winter are coming into view, and the wolves and the grizzly bears are to be found on the carcasses. So the spring is a stunning time to come to Yellowstone, especially if you're interested in seeing wolves. And for reasons that I'm not going to go into in this podcast, this road here from Gardner to Mammoth to Tower Roosevelt to the northeast entrance is the only road in Yellowstone that stays open to regular cars all year round. So you can access the Lamar Valley year round. In addition to the wolves, there's grizzly bears, there's black bears, and there's all sorts of other wildlife, particularly pronghorn, which I love seeing. As you get a little bit further along this road, you're going to get to Soda Butte, and I often see bighorn sheep just on the other side of the road from Soda Butte. This is a part of Yellowstone where you can't go wrong. You don't need me to tell you what to see and do, because the scenery is just spectacular. And once again, as you get closer to the northeast entrance, you get towards the Absorta, that Absorota is pronounced Absorta. You get closer to the Absorta Range with the towering mountains. You come to Silvergate and Cook City, which are two tiny communities. You can also access something called the Beartooth Highway, but just look there and you'll see for how long during the year that it's closed. Once again, check Yellowstone roads to make sure that it's open. You can see over here it tells you Beartooth Highway is closed for the season, and notice that when it gives you the spring opening dates, look how late the Beartooth Highway opens. Dunraven Pass is closed for construction this year, but Dunraven would also open late, and then we look how early the Beartooth Highway closes. But it really is one of the most stunning roads in the entire United States. So it is well worth a visit and a drive along that road. Not only do you have the road over the Beartooth Highway, but coming the other way down towards Cody, Wyoming, you have the Chief Joseph Highway. And what we often tell people to consider doing when they have an extra day in our area is consider taking the road from the northeast entrance, and I generally do it. I do this once a year at least. Come out of the northeast entrance, take the Chief Joseph Highway down to Cody, Wyoming, and maybe I can show it to you on Google Maps if you'll just give me a minute to zoom out. Okay, so we come to Cook City Silvergate, take the road out of the path, but instead of taking the Beartooth Highway, we'll take the Chief Joseph Highway, which is also really stunning. We pick up 120, which takes us to Cody. If you're going to visit Cody, and if you have some spare time, one of the best museums anywhere in the United States, the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, is located there. 5 museums in one: Native American history, Western firearms, cowboys, you name it. Well worth a visit. We'll then follow the road if you do take this detour back into back towards Yellowstone. And as I mentioned before, just before you get into Yellowstone, so here's the east entrance road over here. Just before you get into the park, there is some great grizzly bear terrain as well. So let's retrace our steps from the northeast entrance back towards Tower Junction. From Tower Junction, we'll continue along the Grand Loop Road in the general direction of Mammoth Hot Springs. You'll find this section of the road is pretty. A lot of people will look out for bears along this section of the road. There are a couple of detours that you can take. This road that I'm showing you now, the Blacktail Plateau Drive, is one way the other way, so you'd access it from this point and then come down towards the southeast. and that'll take you into some of the backcountry. It's a dirt road, generally pretty well preserved, unless you're coming here after snow or after heavy rains. But in addition, along that stretch of road as well, you've got a little trail called the Forces of the Northern Range, which is a self-guided interpretive trail. If you have time, consider taking it. Continuing along the road, oh my goodness, so here's Blacktail Pond. Listen to this story. There were either 6 or 7 dead buffalo that were found in this pond this spring. So we were all gung-ho. We were gangbusters. We just wanted to get up there because we knew if there were buffalo there, as soon as their carcasses thawed out, there would be so many wolves and grizzly bears in the area. But unfortunately, the Park Service brought some cranes around and lifted the carcasses out, so we didn't really get to see them. Continuing along the road, Wraith Falls is not that far off the road, but Undine Falls, I can never understand why Undine Falls is not more popular, because it is right next to the Grand Loop Road. There's the Forces of the Northern Range on Google Maps, and I'm just making my way over to Undine Falls, switching back to satellite view so you can see you've got this pullout right next to the road. It's a stunning waterfall. And the views are better in the afternoon when the sun's to the west, because while it may not shine directly on the falls because it's in a bit of a canyon on Lava Creek, you will get better photographs. We'll continue now, and we're going to cross over the Caldera River and make our way up towards Mammoth Hot Springs. And this is Mammoth Hot Springs over here. There is just so much to see and do in Mammoth Hot Springs, and I thought I had already brought up a video of Mammoth, but I hadn't, and I'm also searching in the wrong place like an idiot. Let me just search in our channel. And okay, so here's the Mammoth Hot Springs upper terraces. You'll see that these terraces are actually stunning, and I do go there into them in a lot more detail in our virtual Yellowstone tours. I'm walking at the moment towards Canary Spring, which is one of the cooler hot springs up in the upper terraces area. We'll notice from all the center around, these are where some of the dead terraces are, and then Canary Springs, as you can see, is currently very much alive, although it did die last year for a short period. Anyway, to get back to the map, you can see there's so much to see and do here. This is where historic Fort Yellowstone is. We have another virtual Yellowstone tour on that. From Mammoth, there's a number of ways you can go. You can head up to the north entrance, which is just up the road. Notice how close you are to the Caldera River. And you'll see that we cross from the state of Montana, the state of Wyoming, into Montana. One of Yellowstone's best kept secrets is along this road. And I'm going to zoom in here. There's only one place in the entire park called the Boiling River where you're actually allowed to experience a hot spring. You can get into the water where the remnants of a hot spring come flowing into the Caldera River. It's really cool, especially with the Caldera River being so cold and the hot spring being pretty warm. It's a weird sensation. This is where the 45th parallel is, which is halfway between the equator and the North Pole, even though the Park Service, for reasons I won't go into here, moved it a little further up this road. But where you do come to the sign that says 45th parallel, and I'm just looking to see if the Park Service shows where it is. They don't. But where you come to the sign that says 45th parallel, it's at one of these pullouts. Here's another locals tip for you. Turn around so that your back is to that sign. This area here is closed for bighorn sheep management, which means that there's a decent chance of seeing bighorn sheep. Look for the most inhospitable places, and that's where you've got a chance of seeing bighorn sheep. We'll continue along the road, and we're going to come to Yellowstone's north entrance. The north entrance is just to the south of a town called Gardner. I do encourage you to take a look at this, but be careful. They're currently rebuilding the entry station, which is really small at the moment. So if there's a long line of cars waiting to get in, what we do on our tours is just park to the south of the north entrance, so we don't have to fight the lines to get back in, and then walk to the Roosevelt Arch, which is this really stunning arch. I won't go into the history of it here. If you do decide to leave the park by the north entrance, you'll often see more wildlife outside the park than inside, with herds of pronghorn, elk, and bison in this area. Let's go back to Mammoth now, and we're going to start climbing our way out of Mammoth Hot Springs. I've mentioned the terraces to you. You've got the lower terraces at the bottom, the upper terraces at the top, and we'll see that you can either park on the outside or you can take the upper terrace loop road, but there's very, very limited parking in there, and once you're in there, this road is one way, so you'll have to drive all the way up through the terraces and the various dead springs and dead terraces until you can get out again. As we continue south, this area to the left or to the west of the road is an area where we occasionally see bears, so do keep your eyes open. As we get now to the top of the road, there are a couple of features that you should keep your eyes open for. The one is a man-made marvel. Well, it used to be a marvel in the olden days at Golden Gate Canyon. People used to stop here at this pullout where there is a board describing the history and take a look at the engineering work that supported this road, and there's this big mountain or big hill on the other side. In the days when people first started coming to Yellowstone, that really was an engineering feat, and it's worth stopping to take a look at it. Also, you may miss Rustic Falls because you can't see it from the road itself, so you can get pictures of Rustic Falls either from Golden Gate Canyon, if memory serves me correctly, or just park at this little pullout where you see Glen Creek. Continuing then, we get to the top. Bunsen Peak Trailhead is a pretty cool trail. That's also one of the few trails that you can take a bicycle on, but you go all the way down to the bottom. Make sure there's somebody there to give you a ride back up because it's pretty darn steep. To the left or west are trails that go all the way to US 191, which is the road that runs between West Yellowstone and Big Sky. Here it is over here. You can see it cuts into Yellowstone very, very briefly. Unfortunately, this area here is one of the areas that's closed for bear management in the spring. You'll find that this road now has spectacular views of the Gallatin mountain range. Swan Lake over here is also a pretty area, and the Park Service does have signs at the pullout that will tell you about the mountain range. Don't worry about the color of the lake. It's not really that color in real life. We'll continue now dropping south. Once again, not a lot of thermal features along this stretch of road, and I've switched to the map, which you can see at our motel site, ysmotel.com/map. You'll see Sheep-Eater Cliff. It's worth pulling over there and reading about the Sheep-Eater tribe of Native Americans. Along this stretch of road somewhere, there is a pullout to something called a moose exhibit. A little ironic because we don't really see moose in the park that often anymore. We'll then come to Obsidian Cliff. And Obsidian Cliff has historical significance because it is the first roadside exhibit in the entire national park system. So from that perspective alone, it's worth stopping and taking a look at it. You can't stop at you can't take anything off Obsidian Cliff because the Park Service has fenced it off, but you don't want to take anything out of a national park anyway. And the reason that they have got signs up saying stay away is because people were chipping off portions of the obsidian. Continuing south, we're going to come to Roaring Mountain, which is a hillside which has got a number of fumaroles on it. I'll go into fumaroles in a lot more detail in others of our Yellowstone podcasts. And we'll then come to North and South Twin Lakes and continue. This stretch of road is relatively new, and the Park Service has put in these little pullouts where you can see some springs that weren't all that readily accessible before. We're then going to come to Norris Geyser Basin. Norris Geyser Basin is at the section of road which, as I've mentioned, in fact, before we get to Norris Geyser Basin, I forgot to mention the Museum of the National Park Ranger. That used to be an old military outpost in the old days when the U.S. cavalry was sent to protect Yellowstone. It's now a museum, and it's a great little museum, and check out the building itself while you're there. We'll now come towards Norris Geyser Basin. This road to our right or to the east is the road that I mentioned to you that splits up the Grand Loop Road into two gigantic loops. There you can see the entire loop, and I'll zoom into Norris again. Now, Norris Geyser Basin actually consists of two geyser basins. One is Porcelain Basin, the other one is Back Basin. Both are well worth a visit. You'll see Steamboat Geyser here. That's the world's currently highest active geyser, although you have to be fortunate to see it erupt. As we leave Norris Geyser Basin, you'll see these beautiful open meadows. You'll first come to Elk Meadows. You'll then get to Gibbon Meadows. And after that, you'll see Artist Paint Pot, which is part of Gibbon Geyser Basin. You're not going to see anything really called Gibbon Geyser Basin, but it does have a number of thermal features, the main one of which is artist paint pots. Many people don't do it because it is off the Grand Loop Road, and then once you're in the little parking lot, you've got a bit of a walk to the trail that leads you up and down a hill towards artist paint pots. I do recommend it. It is worth a visit if you have the time. This is the Gibbon River now, to the left or west of the road. Monument Geyser Basin I talk about a lot in our other Yellowstone virtual Yellowstone tours and podcasts, but it is a climb to get up to the top there. You'll see Beryl Spring right next to the road. It's a very pretty spring named after the beryl mineral because it's about, or beryl semi-precious stone, because it's a very similar color. You'll continue along this section of road. You'll find the Park Service has put in some new pullouts where you can stop until we get to Gibbon Falls. This is another area that the Park Service has redone recently, and you pull off the main road into some parking lots right next to the road, and there's wonderful access of Gibbon Falls along this trail, which is now protected from the Grand Loop Road by a barrier that wasn't there a few years ago. So please stop there, take a look at it. Continuing, there's a pretty cool picnic area where you see Gibbon Canyon. It's elevated above the Gibbon River. And we're now starting to make our way back towards Madison Junction. You may have noticed the word tuff. I didn't go into it in a lot of detail where we saw Lava Spring tuff, but there's an interesting pullout somewhere over here which tells you about this tuff and what tuff is. We'll continue on our way towards Madison Junction, and we now have arrived at Madison Junction. I've neglected to mention earlier that even though Google Maps calls this the Madison River is actually formed by the confluence of the Firehole River and the Gibbon River. So this is where the Madison River actually starts. You can take a little stroll into this meadow, into this valley over here, which is really pretty. But once again, even though you're so close to the road, I would consider taking bear spray with me. The Madison campground is the biggest campground in all of Yellowstone. Guys, thank you for joining me on another one of our Yellowstone podcasts. Remember, if you're looking for lodging in the Yellowstone area, please consider our motel, which you can see at ysmotel.com. That's ysmotel.com. And if you're still watching this, I'm showing you a video of the lower Geyser Basin, which I shot at sunset. So if you want lodging, please check out ysmotel.com. We're in the small town of West Yellowstone. If you're looking for a Yellowstone tour, once again, we offer more Yellowstone tours than anyone in the world, which you can see at yellowstonetours.net from every major western city, West Yellowstone, Jackson, Bozeman, Idaho Falls, Rexburg, you name it. If you'd like a day hike into Yellowstone, please check out yellowstonedayhikes.com. That's yellowstonedayhikes.com. Remember, you can see all of our you can see all of our Yellowstone podcasts at yellowstonepodcasts.com. That's yellowstonepodcasts.com. Thanks for joining me on this Yellowstone podcast. Catch you next time.